Hello, strategic management students. It's Fred David here. Thank you for joining in. We're moving right along with our lecture videos in our textbook. Today we're going to be on chapter 8. Starting chapter 8, it's going to be on page 240. If you have your book with you, hope you're able to join in with us. Thank you. I see on this page 240, we're going to be talking about finance and accounting issues. Probably going to be looking at 3 video segments here, roughly 20 minutes each. This first segment I'd like for us to talk about is going to be capital structure. I see this starting on page 243. So the aim of this section starting on page 243 is going to be to determine the best mix between debt and equity, or some combination of debt and equity, to raise capital. Recall back in chapter 6, there was a section there, and in your strategic planning project for your company, you already now have a set of recommendations that add up to some amount of money, capital needed over the course of the next 3 years. So there's a need to determine, should the firm go to the bank to get the money, or issue stock to raise the capital, or some combination, 80-20, 70-30, 60-40 combination. One great thing about this chapter, as with many, is that the template will take the mechanics out of doing this for us. It won't do the thinking, the template won't, but I'm sure you'll want to probably use the strategic planning template now that you've downloaded from the author website to help with this EPS-EBIT analysis that I see this discussion being started on page 244. So for, let's say your firm needs $500 million over the next 3 years, your audience is going to want to know, can your company afford to obtain that much money? And if so, what would be the best means to secure that capital? Debt versus equity versus some combination. That's what we're getting into here on page 244. I see a number of different steps just outlined here for doing this. In fact, the little table at the bottom of page 244 gives the basic outline of an EPS-EBIT analysis. Basically, we're going to make the decision with regard to the best means for raising capital based on earnings per share. That financial ratio is arguably the most important among financial ratios, earnings per share. Oftentimes, stock options and bonuses are linked to earnings per share. And that's what our finance expert friends use most commonly to make this financing decision. So I see that the last line on page 244, you see in that table, is EPS. And so we'll see, we're going to ultimately determine here which financing method, all stock, I see on page 244 at the bottom, or all debt, or let's say a 50-50 stock debt combination. Which of those 3 scenarios yields the highest EPS in terms of raising the capital needed, perhaps 500 million. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing and learning how to do here. I see on that basic format at the bottom of page 244, we're going to subtract. We're first going to put our EBIT, folks, that's earnings before interest and tax. Just in case you don't know, another name for that is operating income. So I see on the bottom of that page 244, we're going to be selecting a pessimistic, a realistic, and optimistic EBIT, and we're going to get a range. That's going to enable us to draw a line ultimately in this process of determining which financing method is going to be best. I see we're going to subtract off interest. You know, one of the good things about issuing a more common stock or whatever to raise capital is you don't have to pay any interest back to the bank. So that's an advantage there. But be mindful that every time you do issue shares of stock, you dilute ownership of the company. So there's going to be a trade-off here. And this EPS-EBIT analysis is going to incorporate these various dimensions that come into play in this decision. And again, to remind you, the template will help take the mechanics out of this analysis. I see then we get our earnings before taxes. Then we're going to subtract off taxes. And you understand our corporate tax rate has been reduced to 21%. So that's a good thing, really spurred economic development here in America. And so we're going to, and your firm may not be paying that higher percentage of taxes. It may be paying lower than that. You can look on your most recent company's income statement and just divide taxes by income before taxes and get a ratio to see the percent. Your firm may be indeed paying 10% corporate tax rate. I don't know. So number of shares issued, number of shares currently outstanding. I see that's in the analysis. And then earnings per share. What is earnings per share? Well, it's earnings, that's EAT at the bottom of page 244, divided by number of shares. So it's earnings per share. That's what we're going to be trying to do. And I see on page 245, we work out my co-authors and I work out a full-blown example of this for Procter and Gamble. So Procter and Gamble, I see the amount of money needed here on page 245 at the bottom in table 8.1. Procter and Gamble's needing $5 million. Their EBIT range, you see it there. Their interest rate, their tax rate, their number of shares outstanding, their stock price. All that is input information into this analysis. And I see the analysis worked out for you on page 246. So row by row, we can look at the row by row here as we work row by row, ultimately ending up with the EPS values across the bottom row in table 8.2 on page 246. So I see the 2.96 for EPS for the common stock, 4.44 for the realistic, and if you compare over to the debt financing, the EPS is a 4.45, a little bit higher down the realistic column. And then actually we're looking at a 60-40 combination here. The template is happy to look at a 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, 50-50 within a matter of seconds, can run those calculations for you. So I see the EPS values even for the 60 debt, 40 stock option on page 246, table 8.2. So the conclusion from this table 8.2 would be that the debt financing is going to yield a little higher EPS for the realistic and a little lower EPS for the common stock financing. So these things are very close. In fact, we've graphed them. Then the template's going to graph this analysis for you as well. I see this graphed on figure 8.2. At the bottom there, I see a break-even point where these three lines intersect. That break-even point is a point at which the three methods used here or considered are equally attractive in terms of EPS. But beyond that break-even point, I do see that the DF, that's debt financing line, yields a higher EPS. So this analysis, once you perform this analysis, you step back and say, well, which one do I really want to go with here now, given this EPS information? There are some limitations or considerations that come into this decision. We don't blindly go by the method with the highest EPS. I see in table 8.3 on page 247, there are 7 actually limitations here talked about that could overturn your decision with regard to using just the highest EPS. The first one is flexibility. As firms' capital structure changes, so does flexibility. You realize when you use debt, it limits you a little more on flexibility. Dilution of ownership, the number 2 in table 8.3. Obviously, the more shares you issue, if dilution of ownership is already a problem with the company, you might not want to go with all stock if that indeed even has the highest EPS. And this analysis also doesn't really consider the extent to which a firm is already leveraged. I mean, if your debt to equity ratio is already twice the industry average or whatever, even though EPS might be highest for the debt option, you might make a managerial decision to avoid additional debt if the firm is already that highly leveraged. Like I say, the analysis in and of itself doesn't really know up front the extent that it's leveraged. So EPS-EBIT analysis is exceptionally important in implementing a strategic plan. That's what this first part of chapter 8 is talking about. So I'm going to stop right here and start another segment on the projected financial statement analysis, which also the template's going to help us do, take the mechanics out of doing this. This new topic here starts on page 247. But I want you to become really good at that EPS-EBIT analysis because it's one of the most important finance techniques that I know of as being used across companies in doing strategic planning. Thank you for joining in with me here. I hope you'll join me here for part 2 of chapter 8 in just a moment. Take care.